Welcome to the City of Orange. In this presentation, we're going to explore a little-known piece of this city's history. So I have to ask you, what does this parking structure, this street, this house, that house, and this field have in common? They're all pieces to a very large puzzle about a brief moment in the history of Orange. This is the story of the big red cars of Orange.
So many of you might know about the Pacific Electric red cars, those large, red train-sized streetcars that crisscrossed all over the Los Angeles and Orange counties in the early to mid-20th century. But did you know that the small farm town of Orange also had red cars?
Well, they did, and I'll be presenting this history of Orange as well as the history of Santa Ana, because without the infrastructure and drama of Santa Ana, there would be no Orange Line. Now, most Orange residents have either seen this photo or this photo in books, magazines, and postcards. But to get to when these big red cars came through this tiny town, we have to go back in time to where, how, and why it all started.
In the early pioneer days of Orange, transportation was rustic as it had been for millennia, with the use of horses, buggies, wagons, and walking. With the land boom beginning to surge and an expected population explosion in Southern California, it wasn't until 1885 where there was talk about building a modern, efficient transportation system like the systems on the East Coast. It was also known that where tracks were laid, whether train or streetcar, towns would grow with new homes and business, expanding a population practically overnight. Santa Ana, being the largest city outside of Los Angeles and also the county seat, would be the first city to lay down track. The nearby cities of Orange and Tustin wanted to join in, so on January 26, 1886, a franchise was established between the cities, and it would be known as the Santa Ana Orange Tustin Street Railway Company. It would be a horse-drawn car line where the railway went from Tustin to Santa Ana and Santa Ana to Orange. 5,000 shares at $10 a piece of capital stock was issued to finance the venture. Half the stock was bought from people in Los Angeles. The other half came from locals and outside the state. Mr. Milton John Bundy of Tustin was the driving force to get this done, especially getting the rail to Tustin after Santa Ana first. 6 months later, on June 12, 1886, a half-mile of track was laid in Santa Ana towards Tustin. The M.S. Baker and Company of Los Angeles was to build the 2 horse cars. And all of a sudden, work stopped because of a railmaker strike on the East Coast, delayed rail shipment for an expected 2 to 3 weeks. It lasted 2 months. The boom continued, however, and the 3 cities built large hotels for the coming population explosion. By October 1886, when the rail finally came in, the line between Santa Ana and Tustin was immediately finished. However, the Los Angeles company building the horse cars were behind schedule and would be delayed for another month. On November 23, 1886, 2 horse cars were placed on the railway and service began. But not to Orange. $15,000 worth of capital was needed for the Orange Line, but the residents thought that was too much to pay, so the line was delayed. Residents of McPherson and Medina, towns east of Orange, started talking about getting a railway through their towns. They had the money, and the track was a fairly simple straight design, making it cheap to build. On February 18, 1887, the Articles of Incorporation of the Orange, McPherson, and Medina Street Railway Company was filed in Los Angeles. It was decided that the rail would be a horse car, starting at the east side of the Orange Plaza, going down East Chapman Avenue, over the Santiago Creek, north on McPherson Road, east on Center Street, going through McPherson and terminating on Esplanade in Medina. In June 1887, sufficient funds were acquired to complete the Orange Line to Santa Ana, but the cars would be a motor engine and not horses, a sign of more modernity. The route that was eventually chosen was from Main Street north in Santa Ana to La Vida east to Glassell north to the plaza, with a connection to the McPherson and Medina line on the east side of the plaza. By November 1887, ground finally broke for the Orange Line to Santa Ana and McPherson and Medina, and track was laid by January 1888, but there was a delay in finding the right motor engine for the Orange car. Until then, a pair of Tustin horse cars was placed on both lines until an engine can be secured. On February 16, 1888, the first horse car ran in Orange. Within a few days, all cars on the Santa Ana, Orange, and Tustin Railway were operating smoothly. Finally, on July 21, 1888, a motor engine was found, and Orange had the first gas-powered streetcar. It made its 4-mile run to Santa Ana in 35 minutes. Santa Ana residents signed a petition to stop the motor car from running on Main Street because they thought it would drive travel off the street, especially scaring the horses. Mr. Bundy thought horses were too slow and expensive to operate, and he threatened to abandon the Orange Line if he had to take the motor car off. Within a week, the Orange Line was shut down. However, in September 1888, after 2 months of public pressure, the Orange Line started up again with the motor car. The end of 1888 was also the end of the boom. By January 1889, the McPherson and Modena line was starting to lose customers, with only 3 or 4 passengers a day. It was becoming obvious that the line couldn't last much longer. In March 1889, severe weather also took its toll. A heavy rain caused a washout of the Chapman Bridge over the Santiago Creek. It put the McPherson and Modena line out for a few days until repairs to the bridge were made. In December 1889, a 12-hour period of rain, pouring 3.5 inches, overflowed the Santiago Creek and washed the Chapman Bridge away. The McPherson and Modena line was dead. With no funds from the city or the Orange County Board of Supervisors, the line between McPherson and Modena never ran again. However, service from Orange to Santiago Creek was still running with a footbridge in place for passengers to walk into town. With barely any passengers to Orange, this railway venture had failed, and the tracks along Chapman Avenue were abandoned in January 1890 and removed 2 years later, and the McPherson and Modena Railway disappeared into history. With revenues still dropping, the Santa Ana, Orange, and Tustin Railway was discontinued. Most locals still wouldn't support the line. They would rather save pennies and walk. The problem was that although Orange County had a public transportation system, it just didn't have a rapid transit system. By October 19, 1895, Santa Ana, Orange, and Tustin Railway forfeited their franchise and stopped operations. It was just too expensive to run. Within 30 days, all the rail in Tustin and Santa Ana was pulled up. Property along the route was sold off. The only tracks left alone was the Orange Line because Orange still had a produce market to move and enough passengers to bring into Santa Ana. In March 1897, a 90-day option was taken on the Orange Line. Ezra Toll and his brother Dudley were given permission to run a steam car. They acquired all the track between Santa Ana and Orange. The horse cars were converted to steam power with a design by Ezra Toll to increase the power to 20 horsepower, and he started the service with his own money. In April 1897, Mr. Toll introduced his new steam dummy. It was called a dummy because it hid all the train parts inside the car so horses wouldn't get spooked. Crude oil was burned to boil water to create steam that propelled the streetcar. It was considered noiseless, smokeless, and odorless. None of that was true. In fact, Orange had a machine that probably created the first smog in Orange County. It would be called the Peanut Roaster in time because of its shrill whistle. It was a huge success, and after 90 days, Mr. Toll got his franchise. 4 years later, in 1901, Mr. Toll sold his franchise to what was called the Old Pacific Electric. Mr. Toll operated the Santa Ana and Orange Line for many years without any problems except at night. When the dummy was parked at the plaza, local hoodlums would push the car down the track, ring the bell, blow the whistle, throw things at it, disarrange machinery, and place obstacles on the tracks. The steam car was better to be housed in a car barn in Santa Ana at night. But a new technology was on the horizon, and electricity was the future. The first electric line would, of course, start in Santa Ana. It wasn't until the following year, on June 9, 1905, that the new Pacific Electric rails were installed from 4th Street down Main Street to the Santiago Creek and stopping at the wooden bridge on Main Street. The substation on 802 East 5th Street was also operational, creating all the electricity to power the entire line from Santa Ana to Orange. On October 5, 1905, Pacific Electric said they had to move the current steam dummy tracks from the east side of Glassell to the center in preparation for an electric car. Another problem was that the old track curve along Glassell and La Veta was too sharp to turn for the newer, bigger cars, and this route was also owned by another franchise. For a Pacific Electric franchise, it would need another road to operate from. On November 10, 1905, the electric connection from Santa Ana to Los Angeles was completed. The Orange dummy, still operating on steam, would stop at the Main Street Bridge, then a Santa Ana electric red car would take the passengers to make the connection to Los Angeles. With the steam dummy running fine, there was little support for Pacific Electric's first proposal for an electric line into Orange, and that couldn't be more clear when on January 6, 1910, there was a big storm flood throughout Los Angeles and Orange counties. Pacific Electric tracks and electric substations were down everywhere except for one. The Orange dummy, using steam, continued making regular trips. On the night of March 29, 1911, street paving, sidewalks, and curbs were now being built, so the tracks had to be moved to the middle of the street. With no help from Pacific Electric, around 10 p.m., several Orange residents ripped up the tracks along the east side of Glassell. Some witnesses thought it was a repair crew. Although this was done without official permission, the deed was done, and not one suspect was ever caught. The dummy, however, could no longer continue from La Vida to the plaza, and with no urgency to rebuild the rail, the Orange dummy ended service to the plaza and started on La Vida to the Main Street Bridge. Buses called jitneys would be used to supplement travel from the plaza to La Vida. On January 23, 1912, Orange Committee Secretary and local pharmacist Adolf Dittmer talked with Pacific Electric in Los Angeles about the conditions needed and offered free of charge to Pacific Electric's access to roads. A road with least congestion and service near a railroad would be best. And so Pacific Electric surveyors came to Orange on February 6, 1912, looking for the best path for the new electric line. With streetcars sharing the road with pedestrians and horses, accidents were bound to happen, and tragedy struck on March 27, 1912, when Orange pioneers Sampson Edwards and his wife were killed in Santa Ana by a Pacific Electric red car colliding with their car. This was the first recorded accident involving an Orange resident. As more track was laid, this type of tragedy would only continue. Throughout the years of red car service, there would be 10 accidents involving Orange residents. Most injuries were minor, yet some were fatal, and the accidents occurred on every intersection on Lemon. The main complaint was the lack of visibility between the Walnut and Orange groves. From April to June of 1912, Pacific Electric gave a proposal to Orange businessmen, who discussed the proposal of using Glassell or Lemon Street at the Rochester Hotel. It will be up to Orange residents to decide what to do next. On June 26, 1912, a meeting was held at the Campbell Opera House. 500 people attended to hear the need for a red car for passengers, freight, and Orange industry advertisements in Los Angeles. And so, as Orange prepared for a red car line into town, there would be many more years of delays, protests, and frustrations. The biggest issue was the curve in the middle of downtown Santa Ana. This curve was needed to park the red cars near the depot. Several residents, led by a Mr. Jackman, would express concern for this curve, believing this zone would be a dumping area for freight. Through 4 years of protests and lawsuits, concerns were fully diminished, and the infamous curve would be built. Orange residents also expressed their concerns about Santa Ana dragging their feet, and to Pacific Electric President Paul Shoup about making promises that were rarely kept. Permissions from all parties involved also caused delays. Pacific Electric needed permission from Orange to remove the tracks from South Glassell, 2 years after Orange residents already started removing the rail in the infamous night mission. And permission was needed for the Pacific Electric tracks to cross over the railroad tracks. This went back and forth for over 4 years. On December 3, 1913, construction begins on Lemon Street. Ties and rails appear on the street, and Chapman is being ripped up to lay the rail. Conductor Hunter and motorman Toll were getting lonely as the old dummy was being used less. On January 8, 1914, crews were ready to build the Pacific Electric Depot on the corner of Lemon and Walnut, which is now named Maple. The depot was to be here, with a track ending here. The Waldorf residence was in the way, so it was sold by Pacific Electric to William Peterkin, who had 30 days to move it. This house was moved from here to 528 North Grand Street, and is still here today. On June 11, 1914, after the Waldorf home was moved, the red car rail came all the way up to Maple Street. The small house next door to the Waldorf home was converted into the Pacific Electric ticket office until new tracks and a new depot would be built. With jitneys operating from Orange to Santa Ana, by 1915, jitneys were everywhere. Santa Ana businesses petitioned that jitneys to not park in front of their stores and not use the sidewalks to solicit business. On January 21, 1916, a massive flood hits Orange County, and once again Pacific Electric's only operational line was from Santa Ana to Orange. On July 8, 1916, the old dummy line was completely removed from the Main Street Bridge. Ezra Toll began working in Los Angeles as a press operator for the Times newspaper. On July 11, 1916, Orange residents begin using the new Orange Electric line, and business is good. On July 22, Pacific Electric starts to operate two non-company jitneys as feeders from one line to another. This was not in competition with the other jitneys, or so they said. On November 21st, Orange officials meet with President Shoup in Los Angeles about building the new depot and extending the Orange line further north to connect with Southern Pacific Railroad. Shoup knows a depot is needed quickly to handle the freight and passenger service. On January 26, 1917, a wigwag signal was installed at La Vida and Lemon, forecasting Los Angeles traffic was coming soon. The Orange Control Tower was also built. This tower ensured the safety between the Santa Fe trains and red cars as they crossed paths. The land purchased in 1914 for the depot was now needed for a yard. More land was purchased by Pacific Electric for the depot to be relocated on the corner of Lemon and Chapman instead. The track now had to come into the block more to connect to the Southern Pacific line up north. The Clayton residents would now have to move. The small house that served as a ticket office was moved to the back of the Lemon Flats at 173 South Lemon Street. The house is still here today. On April 13th, Mrs. Clayton purchased from J.P. Boring the corner of Glassell and Washington to move her house there. May 15, 1917 was moving day for the Clayton house. The house inched slowly by use of horse or mule turning a capstan that pulled the ropes that pulled the house. Mrs. Clayton was seen continuing with her household duties as the house was moved. Mr. Clayton sat on the front porch and watched. Judging from the photos taken from the Rochester Hotel cupola, we can see a piece of the Clayton home. This piece matches the house that still resides on the corner of Glassell and Washington. On November 30, 1917, Orange dummy legend Ezra Toll, now working on a press in the Times building in Los Angeles, was injured when a heavy cylinder fell on his head, crushing his skull. He died 6 hours later. Ezra Toll now rests in an unmarked grave at Santa Ana Cemetery. From January 1st to May 17, 1918, the Orange Pacific Electric Depot was built and opened on June 1st, starting big red car service from Orange and by extension the world. The new concrete bridge on Main Street over the Santiago Creek opened on December 3, 1918. On December 13, Pacific Electric was able to restore Los Angeles service with the bridge completion. However, on December 16, Orange only enjoyed half a day of Los Angeles service when the Santa Ana City Council notified Pacific Electric that the bridge wasn't done. It needed paving and service halted again. 2 days later, the bridge was paved, and in another 3 days the bridge and service opened. By May 28, 1919, Pacific Electric is handling all exports of citrus from Orange to the Southern Pacific Line. August of 1919 was rough for Pacific Electric. Employees went on strike, so the company advertised for new employees and it worked. Then the mail didn't come in to Orange through Los Angeles, so Pacific Electric stepped in with the new crew and brought the mail in on red cars. On August 30, 1919, strikers attacked the new crew and equipment. A $250 reward was announced for the identification and/or capture of the vandals. Still losing money, on November 6, 1920, Pacific Electric advertised that it's cheaper to travel by red car than maintaining a car. But people buying Henry Ford's Model Ts begged to differ. True, owning a car was more expensive, but the price of freedom to go whenever and wherever was priceless. And the Mansur Motors Ford dealership that was just across the street from the depot showcased the future of travel. On March 1, 1922, Pacific Electric officially began a jitney service called the Pacific Electric Land Company. High winds on March 11th in Santa Ana blew down cable wires and debris and stopped red car service. On a high note, on September 25, 1923, Pacific Electric and Grauman's Chinese Theater created a special red car for Orange residents to travel directly to the Egyptian theater to watch the movie premiere of Covered Wagon. 146 locals went to the movie, more passengers from Santa Ana joined in, and 7 cars were needed. An electric sign at the theater welcomed the Orange and Santa Ana residents. January 4, 1930 was when Pacific Electric had its largest citrus fruit shipment to the Santa Fe line north of Orange. 2,400 cars of citrus shipped to the Santa Fe Railway during all of 1929. And then, rumors began to float on June 26, 1930, about Pacific Electric abandoning the Santa Ana to Orange line and ripping out the tracks. General Passenger Traffic Manager O.A. Smith was out of town to confirm the rumor. Orange residents put a lot of effort and money to get the line started in 1907. The next day, the rumors were confirmed. Mr. Smith returned from San Francisco after filing an application to abandon the Santa Ana to Orange line. Tracks would remain in case service restarts. The Pacific Electric bus service would start using the depot in Orange. On June 30, 1930, Orange officials wanted a meeting with Pacific Electric to learn everything about what was going to happen to the Santa Ana to Orange line. By July 5, 1930, the Railroad Commission granted Pacific Electric to abandon the Santa Ana to Orange line, but the city councils from both Orange and Santa Ana must present their sentiments. Buses from 228 West Chapman would now operate from the Pacific Electric Depot on July 10. Red cars would continue for now. The new bus line will follow the red car route, planned as a bus highway, following the rail curves for quick trips in Orange and Santa Ana. By July 31, 1930, major roads were built in cities throughout Southern California, connecting many cities and bypassing Pacific Electric completely. On August 12, the city councils from Santa Ana and Orange consent to the abandonment of the Santa Ana to Orange line, but want Pacific Electric to still operate freight service in Orange and bus service for factory workers in both cities. The new bus line will go from Santa Ana Main Street to La Vida to South Glassell, go around the plaza, then to the depot on Lemon. 37 buses will run every 30 minutes between the two cities. On September 6th, it was announced buses will start on the 15th. On September 14, 1930, after 23 years of service in Orange to Santa Ana, the red car had its last run, and a brief chapter in Orange's history came to a close. A final footnote, on December 3, 1930, Dudley Toll, brother of Ezra Toll and an Orange dummy motorman, now working for Pacific Electric in Long Beach, was injured in a freight accident. He too had a skull injury like his brother, but his injuries weren't considered serious. He passed away 5 days later and was cremated. And that's the history of the red cars of Orange. However, with the use of maps and photos, there's more that happened along the red car route in the after years. Throughout the 1930s, the rails between Santa Ana and Orange were removed, but the wires overhead remained to power the freight service in Orange. With several aerial photos layered on top of each other, you can see how the red car route has shaped the parking lots, roads, and buildings of today. Rail from the Orange Pacific Electric Depot going north to the Southern Pacific Line remained for freight service until the 1980s. After the depot was demolished in 1964, old track near the depot remained into the 1970s until it was covered over with asphalt, when the area became a parking lot. In 2017, as construction for a new parking structure began and the old parking lot being ripped up, it was discovered that the old red car tracks were still there. A section of track is now on display. The Orange Tower was demolished and is now a K-9 training facility for the Santa Ana Police Department. The Rochester Hotel was demolished in 1931, having never been completed, but still used for other things like a college and a movie studio. In 1935, a new post office was built on this location by the WPA. The Mansur Ford dealership across the street from the depot is now the Snooze restaurant. The Clayton House is now Steve Smith Autosports, a magazine publishing company. The Jitney Station is now Country Roads Antiques. This was the location of the Pacific Electric Depot on 4th and French Street. Substation 14 remains intact on 5th Street. The red car bridge over the Santa Ana River was the gateway that led passengers towards Los Angeles, and this relic is still here today. A new bridge has been built alongside the bridge for the new Orange County streetcar system between Santa Ana and Garden Grove. It's interesting how these new cars are following the same route as the old red car line, but at a much smaller scale, but who knows what the future holds.
Will this be a local experiment, or will we have a resurgence in streetcar activity throughout Southern California again? Only time will tell.